clean election, then Joe Biden ran the greatest campaign in presidential history because he shattered decades of records, over a century of records and trends in this election. And the media is not even curious about it. I mean, how do you have a down ballot wave on one hand and then the opposite wave on the top of the ticket? That hasn't happened for 120 years. You're saying the guy that got more votes than any other person in U.S. history doesn't have coattails? Or Donald Trump, the incumbent, actually got more votes in his reelection race and ended up losing? That hasn't happened in 150 years. That Joe Biden lost 17 out of the 18 bellwethers. That Joe Biden won less counties than Hillary, 200 less counties than Barack Obama, and still came out ahead. That Joe Biden lost Florida, lost Ohio, and still won the election. That hasn't happened since 1960, when JFK, some home cooking in Chicago. Or he underperformed Hillary in every major metropolitan area except Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, and Atlanta. Or the fact that Donald Trump won more of a percentage of minority voters for Republicans since 1960, won 95% of Republican voters, won the middle class, yet still lost. I mean, why isn't the media saying, Joe, what's your secret?
Senator Colbeck, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. I know you had a long flight to get in, so thank you for getting here.
No, thank you very much, Senator McBroom, and thank you, fellow members of the committee and all other interested parties here. This is obviously some interesting times in which we live. I appreciate the opportunity to address this body. I know there's a lot of discussion around what happened in the 2020 election. Hope to provide a lot of information around that today. And keep in mind, what I'm going to be talking about today is just the tip of the iceberg due to time constraints. But a lot of people are here to provide testimony. And even right now, I see signs that say, show us the evidence. Please understand there is plenty of evidence.
To come up after Mr. O'Halloran. Sir, your 3 minutes begins. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Senator McBroom. My name is Phil O'Halloran, and I'm a registered voter in Michigan, where I've lived since 1986. My comments are based on sworn affidavits of myself and others in a group I organized, and I'm speaking under oath. On November 4th, I observed a Penske truck that was parked outside the Department of Elections that appeared to be guarded by two men in a city of Detroit pickup parked behind it. They told me that the truck was empty, but when we returned about 4 hours later after dark around 9:30, the two men were still behind the Penske truck. Later at around 10 p.m. after being barred entry to the TCF Center, I returned and saw the truck leaving the DOE and followed it to the TCF Center, where it disappeared inside the rear service entrance. I then encountered a SWAT team blocking my entrance to the county board, and informed the sergeant that if the truck I described was delivering ballots to be counted this late after the close of polls, 26 hours later, that it would be a crime. He said he would not search the truck that night.
November 4th. On the afternoon of November 4th, I believe it was about 4:30 or 5 o'clock when the military ballots came in. And I was working with one particular table when I was witnessing the military ballots, and I found it highly unusual that every military ballot that was logged into the system had a birth date of January 1st, 1900.
You have 1 minute.
And nobody could tell me why the birth dates were 1900. When I went to challenge those votes, the supervisor at the table told me, and I quote, "We're not doing that."
I want to start by showing you, this is a book. I actually printed these affidavits last night. These are affidavits from Republican poll watchers or poll challengers that witnessed incredible events at the TCF Center. At the TCF Center, and there were lots of agitators that were there working on behalf, in my opinion, of the Democrat Party. They would challenge us and tell us to stand back, that we were too close, that we were going to kill people with COVID. So that's what we encountered, and we were not allowed to get up close to the ballots. It just was prohibited, wasn't allowed. At one point, when the military ballots came in, we were told to take a break, that it was a good time to take a break. I'd been there for 6 hours. I worked for a total of 13 hours that day, and the only time I sat down because Republican poll workers had to go upstairs to another room to get lunch or to sit on a chair. Democrats and the agitators all had a corner where food was brought into them. They were served food. They didn't have to leave. When it was time to go to lunch, we had to leave because we didn't have food provided. We had to go to another room. When we got back, the doors were locked. I was able to get back into the room, but I witnessed pizza boxes being placed over the windows so that the poll challengers couldn't see in. And those were being placed over the windows by election workers and by the agitators that were down there.
At around 6:30, there were 5,000 ballots that needed to be duplicated, sitting on a table. If you perceive the workforce, most of the tables had retired. They were on break, and they were none of them were doing anything. And a few of the, or maybe a quarter of the tables, are finishing up precinct countings. When I went upstairs to take a break, right around 7 o'clock, they were dismissing the extra workers that they had for their staff, telling them they were no longer needed. And I came back down, and still none of those ballots had been challenged or were being duplicated. What it indicated to me was a misuse of their workforce. They had 5,000 ballots that needed to be duplicated, but they weren't bothering to process any of them while they had the people available. So, and then I ended up being there, excuse me, on Wednesday to follow up. And I actually was watching a tabulator machine. And it's important to know that I ended up in assault and battery.
Of which, anytime as a challenger, I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet. However, we did not know that that had been overturned the night before, which would have been helpful. But at no time were we able actually to physically see the ballot. I mean, we as a poll challenger are supposed to verify the name, address on the ballot to the electronic poll book. And if it is not there, then it is supposed to be in a paper poll book, of which there was a significantly large poll worker. Anytime that I said that is not in the book, when she would scan it, it would not come up on the screen, then she would basically hover over this paper book, sometimes checking something, and other times we could see that they did not check it. And then they proceeded to manually enter these into the electronic poll book, where then they would come up on the screen. Many of these papers were not absentee ballot, the yellow envelope, the standard ballot. Some of them were on printed paper. Some of them were in white envelopes. Some of them had multiple papers attached.
Thank you, Chairman McBroom. Dear Chairman, I was a poll challenger with the Nonpartisan Election Integrity Fund, both on Tuesday, November 3rd and Wednesday, November 4th. On Tuesday, I was a poll challenger for the city of Royal Oak, where only 10 ballots out of the 25,000 ballots were spoiled and not able to be matched to the QVF, qualified voter file. Royal Oak ran their absentee ballot counting board perfectly. The chain of custody was broken at the absentee counting board in Detroit. How? I watched as hundreds and thousands of ballots came in that poll workers were not able to verify in the QVF nor the paper logbook. Yet, that ballot was removed from the secrecy sleeve, bunched together with other verified ballots, counted and ran through the high-speed tabulators. I have a sworn affidavit of this and have attached it to my public statement. I was able to challenge only 2 of these ballots and get them entered into the electronic record. I attempted to challenge more, but the poll workers simply refused, verbally attacked me, and had others do the same. Of these 30,000 we went through are deceased. We have proof of this. Senator Lucido, you were asking for proof. 2,660 of them, invalid addresses described by vacant lots and burnt down houses. I have a genuine question. Can someone in this room tell me how a deceased person can vote?
Ballots were being duplicated en masse by 3 Democrat poll workers at a time. Where was the oversight in that? I also witnessed a August 4th primary ballot come in, to which they decided they would go ahead and duplicate it to a general election ballot. I also witnessed several of the poll workers yelling, cussing, all kinds of nasty things at a lot of the poll challengers, including myself.
November 4th, early in the morning, I was standing at the adjudication table, and a ballot came across the screen. The ballot had a straight party ticket vote for both the Democrat and the Republican. It was a filled-in circle, which is an intentional mark. It's not a dash, it's not a dot. When the ballot came across the screen, there was no other marks. None of the judges and none of the other ballot proposals had been voted on. The poll worker then said, I think I'm going to give it to the Democrats. That's absolutely absurd. That is illegal. The vote should have been tossed out. At that moment, I said, absolutely not. I'm going to challenge this. So I go get her supervisor. And then her supervisor defers to her and says, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, what do you think? It doesn't matter what you think. It's the law.
One item that I would like to point out to you, the ballot containers that the ballots are stored in, those are supposed to be certified by the Board of Canvassers. They have expiration dates on them, labels. As I was walking through the TCF Center, I located 5 ballot containers that had red labels on them that said do not use. Those were rejected by the Board of Canvassers because they were not secure. The last order that the City of Detroit placed for their ballot containers, the welds were not properly sealed on the back, and you can actually slip paper in and out of the back of those ballot boxes. Those absentee counting boards that used the red label uncertified ballot containers, those will not be recountable.
Do everything in my power to help preserve the republic that was established 245 years ago. Great patriots gave their lives for this republic, and we're about to see it start slipping away from us if we don't preserve election integrity in this country. So I want to give some general observations of specific events that I witnessed on the 2 days that I served as a poll challenger at the TCF Center in Detroit. What's going on here is unbelievable. He said, let me show you something right now before I leave. So he walked me over to the high-speed scanners and tabulators, and he said, see all these Ethernet lines running out of the tabulators? They're all bundled together as they accumulate, and then they're all connected to these routers, and then they all go to the main computer. He said, these are all hooked into the internet, and that is illegal, and it should not be happening because it opens them up to hacking. So
both the MIGOP and Election Integrity Fund. So I went to Tim Griffin of Election Integrity Fund, and I said, can I have my nonpartisan credentials? And then when I got that badge on, everything changed. Like, people just looked at me differently. I was looked at with a lot of hostility when I had the GOP tag, and now that I have a nonpartisan tag, I was respected at the counting boards. I was respected by the Democrats and the ACLU. And in fact, I was able to even help some of the GOP people from being escorted out by putting myself there and asking why they were even being escorted out and arguing with these people. But the whole environment was so hostile and condescending. And a lot of people have talked about the ballots that were not in the poll book or the system. And I was at a table which had a full stack of this file which said not in EPB/S, which is poll book or system. They were scanning and manually entering them, and the signatures on those sleeves were exactly alike, like a bar graph.
Cybersecurity. I was contracted by PDS staffing to work with Dominion voting systems, assisting with IT at the TCF Center. I was on the main stage with all of the city officials. Daniel Baxter was in on the whole thing, and I am under the impression 100% that at least 90% of those workers were all in on this. There was not a single ballot the whole night, the whole 27 hours I was there, that I saw that was for Donald Trump. Not one. Not a single ballot.
Software company needed to have the assistance of support staff for IT.
I believe that it was because Nick and Samuel, that are permanent employees of Dominion, Nick is a part owner, that they had to be together.
Well, you don't know if there was anything that was going glitchy, which means that there was...
Oh, I know of a lot of stuff that...
But my question is, factually, which means today, as you sit here, is there anything you can tell us that was happening with the software where Nick and
Okay, so
Samuel had to go assist in this.
absolutely.
What was that?
Okay, so Samuel was missing for about 3 hours. When he returned, I said, "Where were you?" He said, "I was at the warehouse." I said, "Where's this warehouse?" And I said, "Is it an Amazon warehouse? I don't know. What kind of warehouse is it, right?" And he said, "We call it the Chicago warehouse." Data loss right before they sent Samuel to this warehouse.
What time was that?
That was when Samuel went to the warehouse. That was approximately, it was in the afternoon. I believe it was around 2 or 3.
Is that on the 3rd or the 4th?
The 3rd.
Thank you. I'm okay. You have written testimony for the chair?
I have my
And the
second
committee?
affidavit, and I have what I was speaking off of just
Could you
now.
send that to us, please?
Absolutely.
Include your phone number if you could, in case we
Absolutely.
have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Before you go, please.
Sure.
I have a question. When you testify about ballots being counted multiple times, what are you basing that analysis that they were counted multiple times?
Okay. So, I'm sorry. So the tabulating machines, when a ballot jams, it puts up an error. It'll say discard or recount. So when it puts up that error, when a jam occurs, the correct way to go about it is to discard the whole batch, take the ones that have already been tabulated, put them back into a pile, put the one that jammed on top, and then discard the whole thing, and then rescan them. They were not discarding. So they were just rescanning.
5 total.
2 contract employees, 3 permanent employees of Dominion. Let me just say this, there was 1 permanent employee of Dominion. She went by the name of Danielle. Her real name was China, which she told me later. She's the one who told me Nick was a part owner, which was confirmed later on. She was acting very bizarre the whole night, would start crying, would start saying she couldn't handle being there.
Okay.
I saw the van come in at 4:30 full of ballots. That she left an hour before that, had someone pick her up.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as long as we get her testimony, I would be intrigued to look at whatever you have
Absolutely.
through the chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
We observed ballots being backdated from 11/4 to 11/2, and data being entered into the computers for these mail-in ballots. Poll workers were entering ballot information from new mail-in ballots, including dates of birth of 1/1/1900, into the electronic poll books and processing those ballots for tabulation. The information wasn't in either the electronic poll book or the paper supplement book prior to that. There are problems, and you propose to fix those problems sometime in the future. I and millions of Americans say no. You must fulfill your oath and do your duty to the citizens of the state and country now. You can't turn a blind eye to the mountains of evidence proving the fraud.
All of these new ballots had to have been brand new registered voters on Monday, November 2nd, or Tuesday, November 3rd. I found it very hard to believe that tens of thousands of people had registered in just 2 short days. So I began writing down the names on the ballots immediately after they were scanned by the computer poll worker. As soon as I began, I was severely obstructed by 5 different persons that I could